So I usually start by just giving myself some parameter here, some sort of an idea of where the top of his hat is going to be, his top of his head, and that line that I outlined is basically I want a white border around this. So I know I'm not going to go beyond that, because it's also going to allow me not to get too large with this drawing, and I have to contain my drawing in that space. So this is all blind contour here. There's so many cool things about this pick that I'm using, and that it immediately jumped off the pages, jumped off the screen as soon as I saw it, of this NavySeal. So this is all blind contour, which is how I work. And I've already gone over blind contour in the previous video, but basically the blind contour is how I draw, meaning I don't look at my paper when I make my lines. A blind contour is where you stare at the subject, and you put your pencil down and you move your pencil as you move your eye, and you're looking at the subject and you're tracing the subject with your eye, and you move your pencil. Now I do something called the not really, where once I'm done with that move, I stop and reposition my pencil. So right there, I reposition my pencil. As I make these lines right now on the ear area, and the beard area, and the jaw area, I'm not looking at the paper. Same here, I'm not looking at the paper. I'm looking at the subject. That would be the cheekbone that I just did. And then I'm going to blow this beard out like crazy, because it's a super cool beard. He's got a really super thick, massive mustache. And this is the shadow mask of the actual nose onto the really thick, bushy mustache. And that line that I just did there, that's to hold the underside of the nose. I'm going to treat this all as a shadow mask. I don't need to see nostrils. Nostradamus! Don't need to see nostrils. And I'm just going to move through this drawing, and this is just how I draw. Again, I'm always thinking about the roundness of the head, the back of the skull, and you can see the actual cap, bill, and I just drew through the ear. And then this is the shadow mask of the cartilage of the top of the ear throwing down on the other cartilage of the ear itself. The ear is an interesting concept, and I'm still working on it all the time. And there's these few different pieces going on in the ear. It's very, very interesting. So I'll have more about that later in an upcoming post about the ear and how crazy cool it is. And I'm still learning and growing as I draw the ear. It's pretty crazy. But that's a mask right there. That shadow mask. If you can think of shadows as masses rather than showing a bunch of detail, you're going to be a lot better. Your drawing is going to be a lot better and stronger. Again, this is just the dark lens. So I'll give commentary in and out of this, just so you're not saying, oh, he's not saying anything. It'll happen. Just hang tight. Keep your shirt on. Again, all of this is blind contour. I'm tracking that big puffy mustache, and I want to really push this thing out. I really want to push this out. I'm going to fill it in, and just as a mask to darken the mask itself. And I usually grab my trusty little stick, and I'm pushing on the far right side of that stick now as well. And you can see it's creating sort of like a fan. It's thicker on the outside, thinner on the inside. So I'm twisting and turning and trying to really feel the groove of this mass between his neck right here and his hair back in there, the big thick mass of the neck. But it's coming together. It's feeling really cool. I'm digging it. Wanted to add on a little widen out that mass of the actual cap. Super cool. these decisions right there, those choices are pretty much the thickness of the beard itself, coming into the neck area. You can see I'm drawing on the side of the pencil. I'm twisting and turning right there. I go in and out of holding it really far back to moving upwards onto the stick, the pencil, and I always grab this trusty little stick when I want to mask something out. You can see it's already coming together. I don't know how many seconds. I mean, I'm 5 minutes in. I've got the head drawn out and 6 minutes in. It's feeling really cool. That beard is feeling cool. Now I have to attach the body onto this as well. Again, all that's blind contour. I would really encourage you to try for at least an hour blind contour. Just do blind contour drawings. And I guarantee you your lines are going to be really cool. And I've said this before, if you were to take a blind contour drawing that you learn if you study with me, and you take it to your wife or your partner, you show your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, and you say, here's the drawing that I studied with this artist, they'd look at that drawing and be like, really? You paid for that? But they're not seeing how beautiful a line is, and especially when it's drawn blindly. And so the not really part of it is I'm going to now relocate myself, reposition myself, and make moves based off of positioning my pencil into the right place. So again, I'm thinking also about this deltoid and this arm as it comes down, and I might lengthen this. You'll see that's part of the he's got a watch on, but I felt like this arm needed to be a little longer, and you'll see where I make this longer as I keep drawing. But if you look at underneath his arm, that line, that's a very heavy line, and I've got to deal with that line now. And I will with tone when I go in to start darkening things. But try to draw as light as possible. You're going to see I'm going to make a little adjustment here. You can see right in here. Now I'm going to mask this out a little bit more. I'm going to make this line sort of like disappear a little bit. But I'm thinking round, torso, shadow mask. Try to keep your shadow mask simple. You can see I'm going to get back here and feel this out a little bit more. I want to thicken out his wrist a little bit more. I'm going to reposition this watch. And this is part of his glove and around the wrist area. I'm thinking about beyond the glove. I'm thinking about that massive wrist that is comprised of two bones converging together. And then you have the hand, metacarpals, these floating bones in the wrist as well, which I don't know them all by name, so I'm outing myself there. But nonetheless, I'm feeling form. I'm drawing these shapes round. This is all just a mask, so I'm going to mask it in. And then these are just other shapes of his body and his belt. He has a belt and some pants going on. But you can see this is all blind contour, and nothing is really dark yet. There's nothing. I think he's got a knife in the back pocket. I think that's essentially what this is. But this is all going to be shadow mask and some light hitting in there. I'm also trying to get a read on this gun and this area in here, because there's not a lot of complete detail. A lot of it's just a weird photo, and it's like, what's going on in here? And like, I think this is part of the butt of his rifle. And the last thing I want to do is draw something that's wrong as well. So I might grab more reference. But I'm also thinking about the perspective of this gun. Even though I'm going to wonk it out and I'm not going to pay complete attention to everything, I can have things being wonky. That's my way out of accuracy. Just call it wonk, if you will. But I do want to remember accuracy. I want to always have that underlying everything I'm doing, that I do know accuracy. I do know sanity and reality. But I also want to like sort of almost give a nod to some reality. One of the things I am thinking about as I draw in these days is I'm trying to draw with sort of an abandon that's not rooted in reality, but almost like a complete disregard for rules and a complete disregard for perspective. And let your hand just go wild and see what happens. And I think that's the beauty of the blind contour, is it just goes. And if you were to do a blind contour completely, it would look crazy. It would look Picasso-y. But I'm trying to visit and try to do as much as possible blind contour without the not really, and see what I get. Especially if you start rendering that and putting in value and tone, what would happen? And I'm not really sure. But you can see this is pretty much shaped out. I'm 12 minutes into the drawing. I'm going to knock all the value mask down. So there's a hierarchy of value. I want the brightest brights of value, the brightest brights to be up on his cheek or forehead area. And as you step away, that's where the light is mainly focused. And that's going to direct my attention into that area as well. And again, these are just outline shapes of what I'm going to fill in as a mass. And I'm running out of paper. The beautiful thing about drawing in a confined area is you have to then figure out how to design. It sort of puts limitations on just expanding to whatever size. And you have to make this thing fit within a confined space. And that allows for some beautiful sort of distortions or abrupt changes and moves. And all of a sudden something takes on a style based on the fact that the dictates of your page are telling you, no, you can't make that gun continue. What are you going to do to end it? How will you make it work with everything? And as a rule, my idea as a draftsman as caricature is probably first and foremost, even though I'm not necessarily trying to be a caricaturist. I'm using caricature mixed with classical realism, classical education, and blowing out some specific places. But I'm not going for the big nose joke, if that makes sense. And I'm using value and tone and distortion and shorter bodies or shorter arms to connect to the actual head. And I've seen so many caricatures just draw a head and then put a body on it with no real connection between how does the body morph up into the actual head, how does it attach. And sometimes it doesn't look like it's attached at all, and it's just like this pasted on body. So anyways, I would just pay attention to how your body connects to the head. This is I'm stepping into with drawing this. I don't know what this is called, this Apache helicopter or whatever. I'm stepping into an arena that I don't fully know, so I need to be very, very, very almost vague and just sort of pushed out a little bit so that the actual people who know this device, this machine, don't come after me and say, hey, you were wrong on that. And I probably was wrong, and the photo doesn't give me a lot of information. But as long as I can hint and suggest to it, then I'm cool. I'm going to actually extend that blade beyond the head, even though the photo doesn't. I just like the way it continues beyond. So I'm drawing this rather light because I want it to be a lighter value so it doesn't come forward. So right now I'm still pushing and exaggerating somewhat the shape of this helicopter. And I'm just going to mass it in right now. It gets darker down towards the bottom. But I like it as a shape. And I really do want it to be a nondescript shape from wheels blending right into the undercarriage shadow, if that makes sense. But again, I'm drawing lightly and I'm designing. I think there's a second chopper back here. I like the fact I said chopper. That felt cool. By the way, I'm a huge NavySeal fanboy, fangirl. And I love the Navy SEALs. I could never make it past the Hell Week or Buds. But it's super cool. These dudes are rock stars that are hardcore badasses. And they're just insanely cool. Actually, I've gotten to know a few of them. And I geek out. I've watched everything Navy SEAL. Absolutely everything. My favorite Navy SEAL show, which is called Zero Dark 30, about how they caught Osama bin Laden. That was pretty badass. So right now, I'm just massing in this faded out background, which is probably a 1 value, and I'm gonna map out this flat plane. And again, these strokes are form revealing. That's a flattened plane. I'm gonna come back in and shape it out a little bit later. Yeah, baby, we're going in. We're going in! So now I'm going to add a bunch of value and start creating form, rounding form. And right now I've gone no darker than, there's a few dark spots. You can see it on the shoulder and right underneath the mustache. But right now I'm really pushing hard. I'm gonna now value 7 and value 9 are gonna show up. And what I thought was dark is no longer gonna be dark. But we're gonna go dark now. We're gonna find out what dark really is. So what I thought was dark isn't. Zero Dark 30. So I'm gonna mass out shape this really nice, really cool lens and go pretty dark on this sucker. Pressing pretty hard. Again, I still like really sharp, clean lines as well. So I'll go sharpen a line because it's important you have variation of line width. So you have thick and thin. You can see thick and thin is all over this piece. And at this point, I'm really digging it. And it's okay to like your drawings. This is feeling really good. Look at that. Boom. That's some total coolness right there. That nice simple mass. I don't need a bunch of stuff. You can see just by pushing up towards the tip of that edge that when it comes down towards the lens, it's a little bit lighter. It held that. And now I'm going to go it held that lens. Now I'm going to mask out the cheek on the far left. You can see it's pointed cheek, but it doesn't matter. This is a mask as well. I'm going to probably go dark here. Let me see here. Not too dark on the angled planes of the nose. There's the cheek mask right there. I'm going to kill all the white. And remember that this plane now goes downwards. You can see my form revealing strokes, my form revealing moves. I'm always thinking three-dimensionally all the time, everywhere, everything I do. It's always form revealing, as if I'm sculpting. Try to keep track of the upright planes, the planes that are facing upwards, the planes that are angled. There's angled planes. There's top planes, side planes, angled planes. And they're all going to catch a different value. If something is facing directly upwards, it might be bright. If something is slightly off kilter and away, slightly angled away from the light, it might be a little bit darker, just one step up. You know, it might not be a 0, pure white, but it might be just a little value change. That would be an angled plane. And again, the shadow mask of that cap is maybe a 7. I might be able to go darker. You can see I'm knocking back the white of the forehead right now. Now my nib is getting rather rounded out. I like a sharp edge, but because I'm massing out, my rounded nib is okay. And I'm going to treat this as a shadow mask here. This whole cast shadow onto the mustache, underneath the nose. Very simple mask. No nostril. Just a nice simple mask filled in. They've said if you just draw the shadows, you can get a great likeness. So this is coming along really cool. This is feeling really good right now. I'm going to mask in the mustache, and it's going to get dark, and it's going to all come together. So again, those moves that I'm doing are sort of pushes, where I'm pushing down. And I'm getting a nice hard edge on the right-hand side of the pencil. And then as I push it to the left, it fades out. So I get a nice sort of beginning line. Even that line I just did in the mustache is cool. But they're sort of bursts in one sense. Also, I'm keeping track as to where the lighting is coming from, and I believe it's coming from the top, sort of almost right side. So then as I'm also working my way to the edge of the beard, I'm keeping the outer sides of this rather soft, and the idea there, it's sort of like a the soft edges and the hard edges, and obviously the hard edges are what draws your attention, and the brightest values are what draw your attention. So eventually when I finish this, I'm going to have the brightest spot, the brightest area be right on the top of his lens. It's on our left of his sunglasses or his shades. And I'm also aware of where the darkest spots are. At this point, even his hat and his lenses and underneath that nose, they're about the same value. I don't have any problem with it, but I'm going to knock things down. At this point, I just did a nice heavy line because it needs to hold the underside of those glasses. So I'm going to fill that in with a little bit lighter value than the actual lens. But that really holds it. Now I'm going to darken the actual frame of the shades. But I'm also leaving a nice highlight there where that, it's not so much even a highlight, it's a top plane of the lens. And then I'm just going to sort of blend things in and just sort of mask some things out. Again, a nice clarifying line right there. Darker edge from the left to the right. That's catching a darker edge on that edge of the lens. I'm just knocking some things back here. As you can see, my moves are small. They're calculated. And that's one thing I'm learning. I'm trying to slow down and make calculated moves that mean things. And it's called economy. I'm trying to draw with economy, meaning I could make 1,000 lines, but if only 4 of them make sense, then I've wasted 996 lines. So I want to fill in and mask this ear. I don't need to know that there's all this detail in there. Again, that nice darker edge off the far left of that ear. And then all of this is going to be sort of around the edge of the skull, which is a round mass away from the light, sort of the dark side of the moon. And I'm not always just following the photo. I'm always thinking about form. And I don't want to get a lot of detail into the shadow masses. So the story is in the light. Nice little... again, this is sort of form revealing. There's a roundness of the socket that comes out and towards us. And you can see where I'm thinking about that. I'm not just copying a photo. I'm saying that socket of the eye is protruding outwards. And so you can see where that shadow is thin and then it starts to get thick right under that strap of the cap. And here's some design that I'm tracking the tone of that beard. And it sort of becomes a style, but I'm not just trying to show off and be stylized. I don't believe in that. I think that when you're just capturing the essence or the shapes of what you're doing, and because I'm blind contour, not really, I'm really tracing and outlining what I see. So if it's a mass of hair, it's not individual hairs, it's shapes. And that sort of creates my style. But I'm just letting you know my thinking. Again, all of this back here is the dark side of the moon. It's rolling around the side of his head where the light is not hitting. There's the hair mass. I'm trying to keep this as a simple 3 sort of pronged little mass there. There's the shadow mass onto the bill that the ear's casting. And now I'm thinking about this bill. I think I come in and do a few moves that sort of are underneath the roundness of that bill. But all of this is just sort of playing it back and just sort of massing it out. And I just fill it in with some odd sort of scribbles and lines. And again, that makes my style, but I'm not trying to be stylistic. I'm just going back to classical education where I'm massing in a shape or I'm massing in a shadow mass. So again, it's a mixture of classical education that treats shadow masses simple and shapy, but they hold together as a mass before they're sort of like variety or detail. So it's unity first with the mass as a mass first. And then there's little bits of unity in there, little bits of variety, little bits of detail. But they hold together as a mass. And so from this point on down below to the bottom of this beard, it's all going to be a mass again. And again, it's a simplified mass down here. And as I get to the right, I want to fade it out. But here I'm committing to some serious hard lines. And this is all masked out into the neck. All of this is a cast shadow. And the tricky thing, I think I may have mentioned this. This is the second day I'm recording this, so I can't remember what I said. But this photo was tricky to figure out what the heck was really going on underneath this neck, and especially with this gun. I don't know if you call it a gun or a rifle. I'm not a Navy SEAL. I wish I were. But anyways, I'm trying to look and see what is going on with that gun area underneath that shadow mask. Here I just sort of darkened out and widened out the back of his skull with this hair, clarifying the cartilage of that ear. And again, it just fades into that edge, that hard edge, and I'm broadening out that mass of that shadow over the cartilage. But it's a simple mass. There's not a lot of detail in there. And it's not super dark. Value scale, maybe a 6, maybe a 7 value. Here's where I think I go underneath and round that edge. So you can see it's a hard edge underneath, and then it softens up into the bill of the cap, and it becomes a little bit softer. I'm rounding that edge. I'm going to knock all this back right here. I don't want a bright spot right in this area. Especially on this ear. I'll come back later, but you can see I'm just sort of knocking back values, just sort of darkening these masses and knocking down the brightness of the cartilage in this ear, clarifying right here where the inside of that cartilage is sort of like an angled plane, and then all of this is probably cast into the shadow mass. But these are all clarifying lines. Boy, I got a lot of wind happening in my studio today. So, anyways, I'm very aware that this is a side plane of his face. There's front planes, which is really pretty much right where I am right now. But you can see right now, especially on that fold of the front of the cheek area going into his nose, it's a round mass. It rounds into the nostril area, or the cartilage of the nose. This is the side plane that's dark. And I'm just going to mask this sucker out. And I do want to darken a little bit. But you can see these are nice solid strokes. My pencil's not sharp. It's rather a blunted end of my pencil, because I want thicker strokes. I want to mask this out. I'm looking back and forth at my reference, my swipe. But it's coming together, and it's really a shape before it's a beard. That's super key. I'm darkening things. I'm going to clarify these beard shapes a little bit more. Again, just to mask this out a little bit more. You can see where that sideburn blends into that shadow mass of the lens itself, or the arm of the glasses. Even though there's line included in this, there's a mixture of tonal sort of edges fading in and rounding into the light. So when the light hits rolls into the shadow mass, you can see it up above the ear there. There's, like on the cap, there's a hard line, and then it starts a brighter value where the light is still hitting, and then it rolls into the shadow mass again. So even though it's linear, there's also form that I'm shooting for. Now, that was a hard line I just did on that hair, But you can see right behind that hair stroke, there's a softer mass that creates a little bit of volume. There's a front and there's a back of that hair. So it's a matter of lighter value, softer stroke, and in the front it's harder and darker. That creates volume. Front and dark, front and back, dimension. And I'm trying to treat the upper mass, this mustache, as its own piece. It's a big, gigantic mass as one. Even though there's some shape variety in it, it is a big mass sitting on top of a chin mass of hair. And here's where I'm just going to play off a little bit with the crazy, wacky hair. You can see how blunted my stick is. But I'm not pushing that hard right now. I'm just sort of trying to clarify some form, side edge, knock down some value. And it's a building up of all these little tiny moves. Now I'm going to step into this shirt area here. Move down. Still haven't sharpened my pencil because I'm massing. It's feeling pretty cool at this point. I'm digging this. And it's okay to dig your work. By the way, if I haven't said it, thanks for following me here on Patreon. I'm always surprised when people are interested in what I'm doing. That's it, my friends. Later, pals.